Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
And why didn't she have the right to live happily?
Almost 20 years after she was murdered in India, Jazzy Sidhu's mother and uncle have been extradited from BC to face trial. Also,
the leader of the opposition called the speaker a rogue and out of control.
And if all of us continue to squirm around in the pit mud wrestling, we're going to look like a pack of idiots.
The NDP and Liberals trade barbs on how to clean up the legislature spending scandal. And
it's hard to say where it's actually coming from.
A local solution to taking the sting out of honey fraud.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. It's a saga that's been unfolding for almost 2 decades. In the spring of 2000, a young Maple Ridge woman was killed in the Indian state of Punjab. Last night, Jazzy Sidhu's mother and maternal uncle arrived in New Delhi, escorted by the RCMP under an extradition order. The two are now waiting to face charges related to masterminding Jazzy's death. Belle Puri has our top story.
Well, there they are, the happy couple.
Jazzy Sidhu and her husband Mithu should well have been happy. They were newlyweds. In the early 1990s, James Longridge was Jazzy's high school principal. Over the years, he's gathered volumes of material documenting the couple's story.
And why didn't she have the right to live happily with her husband and have children if they wanted them, and even come to Canada?
The two met while Jazzy was on a visit to India with her mother in 1994. Eventually, Jazzy went back and secretly married Mithu. Her family thought him to be beneath them and disapproved of the marriage. In spring 2000, the couple was ambushed. Mithu was beaten. Jazzy was abducted. The next day, her body was found next to a canal in a nearby village. Her throat had been cut. Not long after, it was alleged the attack was masterminded in Canada. Jazzy's mother, Mulkit Kaur Sidhu, and Jazzy's maternal uncle, Surjit Singh Badesha, are now in the hands of Punjabi police, extradited to face conspiracy charges.
Through this long process of extradition, we have got them back here now, and they will be produced before the court of law.
It wasn't the first time authorities had tried to send the pair to India to face charges. In September 2017, it appeared Badesha and Sidhu were on their way to face charges in India. They were removed from detention centres here in BC and taken to Toronto and put on a plane destined for Delhi. But before it could take off, RCMP boarded the plane and removed the pair. Their lawyers had filed a last-ditch appeal. It failed. At the family compound in Maple Ridge, no one wanted to talk about the case. Former journalist Fabian Dawson has followed the story from the start. He says there's a high possibility the two could be acquitted.
Assuming they go through a trial in the lower courts, we're looking at about 2 years to 2.5 years. And then if it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, between 3 and 4 in India. But they could be back here, if they wanted, by 3 years.
If that's the case, ultimately the two will have spent more time in jail in Canada than they ever will in India. If they're found guilty, a conviction will come with a life sentence. Belle Puri, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
We will hear more from the journalist who broke the original story later in this newscast and why he has concerns about the upcoming trial in India. Well, the ink is barely dry on the Plecas report, and the blame game is ramping up in Victoria. Politicians are trading barbs amid the fallout from the Speaker's allegations of out-of-control spending at the legislature. As CBC's provincial affairs reporter Tanya Fletcher tells us tonight, the spotlight is now casting back on the BC Liberals.
Are we ready?
Day 4 of the report fallout began with opposition leader Andrew Wilkinson.
So I'm asking Premier Horgan to join me in a non-political effort to stop the sniping over who said what to whom and clean house around here so that people can trust this institution once again.
Wilkinson went on to propose 3 things: an immediate ban on any foreign travel unless pre-approved by LAMC, that all Legislative Assembly expenses be posted online, and that BC's Auditor General conduct a review of accounting procedures. Premier John Horgan wasted no time responding.
I'm prepared to support the Legislative Assembly Management Committee. I'm prepared to support the principle that we bring in the Auditor General to get to the bottom of this, but I will not allow the Leader of the Opposition to pretend that this just happened.
He may be referring to some of the details in the report. An accounting of Clerk Craig James's trips within the province show he was meeting in recent months with former Liberal MLAs and former Premier Christy Clark. One of his most frequent meetings was with former Attorney General Jeff Plant. The document shows that between March 2017 and September 2018, James met with Plant 14 times. The total of those visits topped $7,000, not including mileage claims or flights. Our calls to Jeff Plant have not been returned. His law firm says he's on holidays. One of those meetings with Plant also included former Speaker Bill Barasoff. Barasoff has not been in the legislature since 2013, but James visited him in the South Okanagan on 3 occasions, claiming nearly $4,000. Our calls to Bill Barasoff have also gone unanswered. Another person James has met with and claimed as an expense, former Premier Christy Clark. She left politics in July 2017, but the report shows James met with her 2 weeks before that and continued to meet with her at least 3 times after. The bill submitted for those meetings totaled around $2,000. Christy Clark has also not returned our calls. Meanwhile, the politicians continue to call for nonpartisanship.
And if all of us continue to squirm around in the pit mud wrestling, we're going to look like a pack of idiots.
For the Leader of the Opposition to say, stand with me and defend the indefensible is not something I'm prepared to do.
But until the results of a sweeping audit and RCMP investigation are revealed, the people of BC will be left with little more than political posturing. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
The City of Vancouver wants your input on a redesign for the Granville Street Bridge. It's a redesign that proposes reducing car traffic on the span. Our Tina Lovegreen headed out to the bridge to see what the changes might look like.
The redesign of the Granville Street Bridge will take 4 of the 8 lanes of traffic and use them for cycling and walking. And what's interesting about the design is that the lanes won't be running through the side of the bridges, but instead they'll go through the center and they'll be elevated, which the city says will create a buffer between cars and those cycling or walking across the bridge.
I don't think I've ever experienced that. I'd have to give it a go before I'd give it the thumbs up.
The city says the redesign will make the bridge safer for pedestrians, who agree it doesn't feel so safe right now.
The cars are coming so fast, and the sidewalk is so narrow, and then if you have pedestrians going this way and this way, there's not that much room to walk.
Case in point, right here.
Sorry, you guys.
We had to stop our interview to accommodate just that. And then there is the crosswalk. Harry Gill had to wait out at least a dozen cars before he could cross the bridge.
So I was going to be extremely cautious before I crossed it because there's a curve, and so around a curve, a driver can't see, and there's not much room there.
The bridge, built in 1954, wasn't designed for pedestrians. It was designed as part of a high-speed, high-volume freeway that was never completed. City staff said they won't comment on the project until they present their technical briefings to council. But in the report, staff say $25 million has been earmarked for the project as part of the city's 2019-2022 capital plan. The Granville Street Bridge was the last of 3 bridges to be improved for pedestrians and cyclists. Work has already been done on the Burrard and Cambie Street bridges, but those changes didn't come without backlash from some drivers.
The report will go to council on Wednesday, with consultations expected to begin in February. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, from the bridge to the track, and as we told you last night, momentum is building for a SkyTrain line out to UBC. Today, TransLink officials told the region's mayor's council it's the best bet for the Broadway corridor. But as John Hernandez reports, several mayors have concerns about the cost.
I would think for this and other priorities, the time act is now.
There was plenty of enthusiasm for what could be the next addition to the SkyTrain. Today, 21 mayors from across Metro Vancouver heard the case for a Millennium Line extension to UBC. Some were quick to hop on board.
I'm super chuffed about this, and I think people in the region should be very excited.
Plans are in motion to extend the Millennium Line from VCC Clark to Arbutus Street. Today, TransLink told the Mayor's Council that it makes sense to keep pushing west.
The bus corridor along the Broadway line is the busiest bus corridor in Canada and the United States, and it services residents from all across the Metro Vancouver region.
TransLink expects there will be heavy growth in the area by 2045, and the volume would best be served by a SkyTrain line. But mayors from other parts of the region felt their communities were left out and even raised eyebrows over the SkyTrain's $3.8 billion price tag.
We're not currently as well served by transit, and we're sitting behind walls of congestion in our community.
When we're going to go and pump $4 billion into an area that is already very, very well served by transit, there's a question of, okay, well, what about us?
TransLink says the route will serve commuters from across the region who travel to the Broadway corridor daily. Despite some reservations today, Council voted unanimously in favor of hearing a more detailed report, and final voting would need a simple majority to carry forward. After that, the next step is getting the money for it.
I'm going to the Big City Mayors Conference, fly out Sunday, meet with the Prime Minister and other ministers. The key, all big city mayors are focusing on transit on this trip, and so that's what I'll be doing.
TransLink has already secured funding for the SkyTrain extension to Arbutus. That project will be done by 2025. And if all goes as planned, the extension to UBC could be ready just 5 years later. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Gabriel Klein has been ruled fit to stand trial. Today, a judge ruled Klein can be tried for the second-degree murder of 13-year-old Letitia Reimer. Reimer was stabbed to death inside her Abbotsford High School in what police say was a random attack. Klein will stay in a psychiatric hospital during the trial. Vancouver police are making another plea for the driver involved in a hit-and-run last Friday to surrender to authorities. The driver sped through a pedestrian-controlled red light at East 41st Avenue and Commercial Street at about 1:30 in the morning and struck a 53-year-old woman. She was seriously injured and died the following day in hospital. Investigators believe the vehicle was a 2000 to 2006 BMW X5. Anyone with information about the vehicle or the collision is asked to contact VPD. 1 year after a teenage girl was struck and killed by a car in a now infamous Burnaby Road crossing, the traffic light many people called for has been installed. Before this light hung over Caribou Road, south of Highway 1, the only safety measure was this crosswalk. 15-year-old Fernanda Girotto was crossing that stretch of road when she was struck and killed by a vehicle last January. The cyclist was hit less than a day later. 2 men have since been charged in Girotto's death. Surrey RCMP are urging people to check their credit reports and bank statements after an investigation into identity theft and automotive fraud led to the seizure of hundreds of thousands of dollars in vehicles and an armory's worth of weapons. Police seized a variety of guns, imitation guns, axes, swords, and other edged weapons from a home in the 8300 block of 125 A Street. That same investigation also saw 4 cars worth a total of $225,000 seized. Officers detained 7 people found in the home. All have since been released. The investigation is ongoing. And Surrey RCMP are warning the public following reports an alleged groper has been targeting women in stores across the city. Separate incidents span a period of several weeks from late December to mid-January. 3 women say they were working on the floor when the male suspect asked for assistance. Shortly after, he groped them and in one instance tried to pull the woman from the store. RCMP are asking the public for help in their search. The suspect, described as South Asian with chubby cheeks, medium chubby build, and a mustache. He's been spotted in a baseball hat, dark hoodie or sweatshirt, sweatpants, or even black pants. Anyone with information is asked to contact Surrey Mounties or Crime Stoppers. Well, we now know the identities of the 2 men killed in shootings yesterday morning at 2 different motels in Kamloops. Investigators are still searching for a suspect, but as Brady Strachan reports tonight, they do believe the killings are gang-related.
Investigators are back for a second day, combing the area around 2 motels in Kamloops for evidence. The shootings happened Thursday morning, first at the Super 8 Motel in the Valley View neighborhood. The second just 10 kilometers away at the Comfort Inn and Suites 2 hours later. In each case, police found the victims outside the motel, suffering gunshot wounds that proved to be fatal. RCMP Inspector Steve McLeod says police believe the victims were targeted and the killings are gang-related.
These shootings were very public and put our community at risk. Enough is enough. If you should choose to be involved in these brazen acts, we will take every available enforcement option and action to ensure you stop.
Police have identified the two victims as 31-year-old Cody Marcel Matthew of Kamloops, who is known to police. The second is Rex Edward Gill of Penticton, who police say they are not familiar with. Today, friends of Gill are asking themselves how the 41-year-old could have got caught up in the violence. Former Penticton City Councillor Max Picton has known Gill most of his life.
Every memory with him is just amazing. They're happy times. He's a guy who was so full of positivity. He didn't have room in his life for negative. If he came over and you weren't in a great mood, by the time he left, you would be. He wouldn't accept that you were having a bad day.
Back in Kamloops, the RCMP have called in officers from BC's Gang Task Force to help with the investigation.
Violence in the communities is often seen in cycles. We may experience periods of relative calm followed by several violent and very public incidents. While planned to some degree, these are most often crimes of opportunity. They can happen anywhere and anytime.
Police haven't named a suspect or suspects, but McLeod says on Thursday a white vehicle was found burning in the Barn-Hartvale area, which they believe may be connected to the crime. Inspector McLeod says violence like this affects everyone in a community, including police officers and their families. McLeod says there are more than 50 investigators working this case, but he's asking the public to remain vigilant. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kamloops.
When you think of Joffre Lakes, images of turquoise waters ringed by snow-capped mountains might spring to mind. But lately, so does the vision of jam parking lots and trails full of hikers. Our Megan Batchelor now on why more isn't being done to enforce the parking rules.
A quick search on Instagram and the appeal of Joffre Lakes is apparent. A moderately easy hike ending with the perfect backdrop for that beautiful shot. But just kilometers away from the pristine beauty, a highway is lined with cars, overflow parking from a packed lot.
You know, I think Instagram has given us a very good reputation for the beauty on the front end, but if we're not proactive about making investments and ensuring that the experience for visitors is positive, I think that we're going to start to lose our reputation as a place that's beautiful to visit.
Last year was so bad, Jones took matters into his own hands. He filed a Freedom of Information request. It revealed frustration from members of the Pemberton RCMP. The documents show they're not allowed to ticket the illegally parked vehicles lining Highway 99 unless the driver is there.
The reality is, if we're sending people up there and we're encouraging them to visit the park, we need to make sure that there's a safe place for them to park.
In order for the RCMP to hand out tickets to those illegally parked vehicles, there needs to be a bylaw enacted. Now, the province says that's up to the regional district to do. The regional district says, though, that since it's a provincial highway, it's up to the province. Once we heard that from the district, we went back to the ministry for further clarity. They won't be able to provide that until Monday. The documents also unveiled something Jones did not see coming.
The line for the outhouses is so long, people can't humanly hold it in, and they're just going to the washroom in the parking lot. And it's just disgusting.
Jones worries images like these will be replaced with Instagram posts showing the reality of a day at Joffre Lakes next year.
I think that we're going to start to lose our reputation as a place that's beautiful to visit, and it'll be very hard to undo that because the amount of advertising dollars you'll have to spend to overcome that negative messaging is going to be massive.
Megan Batchelor, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, Abbotsford probably isn't near the top of your list when you think of university towns, but the City and University of the Fraser Valley are hoping to change that. South of the Fraser reporter Jesse Johnston explains.
If you go to the University of the Fraser Valley and you want to stop for a coffee or a pint, you're in for quite a hike. Even the school admits the neighborhood around campus is a little dull.
If you look in the area, there's not a lot of restaurants and pubs and the rest of it, coffee shops.
But the city and university have big plans for what they call the U District. They picture a walkable, bike-friendly community with patios and green space. The kind of place where you can't tell where the campus ends and the neighborhood begins.
We want to make walking and biking and transit delightful in the city, and it currently isn't.
Anyone at this bike shop near the school will tell you the neighborhood has been anything but delightful for cyclists, especially when you exit off the highway through a pair of traffic circles.
It can certainly be treacherous. We've seen, lots of people come in and maybe have a bike repaired that's maybe had an incident on the roundabout.
That's why there's so much pomp and circumstance surrounding the opening of this new overpass for cyclists and pedestrians.
Normally, by crossing the freeway over at the big exit up here, the roundabouts are definitely get you nervous. Plus, it's that little extra distance. It shortens my trip and makes it a lot safer.
The city and university say this crossing is the catalyst they need to transform this neighborhood. Now that it's here, they expect thousands of new housing units, plus restaurants and cafes, to sprout up.
This will bring a lot of people to the area. With a university anchor, that starts to become a really exciting place to be, to live. So it could be a game changer in terms of attracting those young creative minds that are often lured to the lifestyle in Vancouver.
Abbotsford still has a ways to go before it can truly be considered a university town. But it's getting closer. Jesse Johnston, CBC News, Abbotsford.
And Amy Bell is here now with the first look at the forecast. Kind of one of those blah January days, really.
I think that's the technical term. Just,
yeah.
Yeah, it was a little damp, very low cloud, so it seemed very dreary. We had a few breaks of brighter sky and even saw a few little hints of blue sky, but that's how we're going to see things remaining for the next 24 hours at least. We will see a change on Saturday, but yeah, we still have to get through one more day of sort of just that drizzly, gray, typically Vancouver weather. As for the temperatures, it is starting to cool off. We're sitting at 6 in Vancouver, -1 in Fort St. John, so we really can't complain about anything. And looking at -2 in Revelstoke, still a little bit above the seasonal average. For the next 24 hours, we're seeing the same pattern that we saw last night and today, where we just have these very light winds, and it's not enough to really generate sort of that stirring and clearing action for the clouds. So we see that low ceiling, that very sort of wet, damp layer just dropping down enough to give us some breaks of drizzle, and we will start to see things a little bit brighter sort of midday tomorrow. And into the afternoon, we will fog over, though, Friday night, and that fog lingering for much of the day on Saturday. Saturday is the transition day, so we will start to see a little bit of a change tomorrow. Across the province, we still see a range of precipitation, so even though we're quite protected, we will see some flurries in areas of the interior and the Kootenays. Overnight, we'll drop down to about 5 degrees, and we'll stick with the 5 through most of the morning hours. We'll see a little bit of patchy drizzle and steadier showers, and then we will start to dry up right around the 11 o'clock hour. And as I mentioned, we'll see a couple little breaks of bluer sky, but for the most part, just gray, a little bit damp. And then the fog rolls in Friday night into Saturday. And then Sunday is when we're going to see some sunshine finally. I know it seems like a ways off, but we will get there. Just one more day of sort of cool and wet weather, unfortunately.
All right, we'll look forward to that. Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
And just before we go to break, a programming note about tomorrow at 6 o'clock. This newscast will only be available online, so if you want to watch us at our regular time, you'll have to tune in on YouTube, Facebook, or on our website, cbc.ca/BC. We will still have a TV broadcast, though. We'll be live at 8:30 after the NHL All-Star Skill Competition is done. So there you go. Well, it's a sticky situation, but no laughing matter. BC honey producers are working to take the sting out of honey fraud. How to spot a fake next time you're out shopping, right after the break. Well, good evening and thanks for tuning in online tonight. Amy Bell is here for this week's edition of Throwback Thursday.
And what better way to reminisce about the old days than to take a look at the fashion trends. Back in 1994, we sent former CBC reporter Bob Nixon to the mall to see what was in style.
So take me on a tour of this place. What would you buy?
I don't work here, but I'll take you on a tour anyways.
Take us on a tour.
Okay, let me see here. See, everyone's into white jeans now.
Everyone's got to be the white ones. Why is that?
I don't know.
It's
It's style, man. It's not gangster color or nothing. It's just neutral color, you know?
Yeah. Now that can't be selling.
You can wear my
Would you guys want this?
No. No.
Why not?
Well, it's they're not our style.
Okay, this is what, Levi's?
Yeah.
They look a little big for you, you know that?
That's okay.
It is?
Yeah.
I mean, these would fit me.
Then you should get a pair.
I can't stand shopping for men. They're worse than girls.
Come on, that can't be. Now you buy them a pair of jeans, a couple t-shirts, and you're done, right?
$400 later, yeah.
Pair of jeans, about $500 altogether, maybe. That's just not me. And then my sister is like maybe close to maybe like $1,000. My mom pays $500 for her. and she pays the rest.
Parents, what, stock promoters or something like that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Now, you're the first guy I've seen actually with a
bulletproof vest?
Bulletproof vest, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, you know, I can't sell drugs in the street without, you know, a vest. No, this is actually, I won it last night at Bonita's.
Bonita's?
I'm not of age, but I got in there.
Don't see you gagging at the prices yet.
I think they were on sale, are they not? I was told they were on sale.
$25 for a t-shirt.
I know, but you know, she's special.
Something soft colors and very...
Soft colors are in this year?
Yep, very trendy too.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you wear this clothes here? It's very comfortable. I think quite stylish. I like it. Plaid, it's in.
Yeah, plaid's in. Yeah. But something like this plaid.
I've been insulted.
It's plaid and flannel.
Get a pair of jeans, Calvin Klein. They actually cost $20 to make the jeans, and you're paying $50 for the name. You know, it's not worth it. You know, like I'll just go make my own at a pair of curtains or something if it's too expensive. You know. Oh my God, $72. What a deal.
I love watching those.
Oh, that was my heyday.
You see that? Yeah. Could the baggy jeans ever could they make a comeback, or did they just morph into like dad jeans?
I think they just morphed into dad jeans and mom jeans. That's fine. We don't need any more baggy, wide leg jeans.
The prices haven't changed. This stuff
No,
is
apparently.
expensive. It's crazy. All right, we're going to have more news in just a few moments, including an apology from Canada's ambassador to China over comments he made on Meng Wanzhou's extradition. We'll be right back. A local honey producer may hold the key to helping Canada take the sting out of what's being called honey fraud. Last year, more than 20% of imported honey products tested by food inspectors in our country contained additives, despite being labeled pure. As my co-anchor Anita Bathe reports tonight, the industry is vowing to fight back.
We'll open it up here.
Peter Arum's family has been in the beekeeping business since the 70s, but it's becoming less lucrative.
The extent of the honey fraud is just skyrocketing. It is getting out of control.
In the last decade, there's been an increase in honey spiked with syrups like rice and corn.
It's hard to say where it's actually coming from. Most people suspect that China is the majority producer of it.
China can't directly export honey here. Its standards don't meet Canadian regulations, but its honey lands on our shelves via other countries.
There is an enormous increase in the amount of honey that is exported from a few countries, but they don't have any more bees. It's like their production has more than doubled over about the last 10 years.
The Canadian Food Inspection Agency says it regularly inspects and analyzes domestic and imported honey to verify compliance. Last year, 23% of samples tested contained foreign sugars.
It's just going too slowly. We need this to happen now, or there may not be a honey industry here in Canada in the next 5 years.
So Arum is taking honey fraud into his own hands as one of just a handful of people in North America with an NMR machine to detect additives.
You drop it down into the center, and then it shoots a magnetic pulse at it, and you see how it reflects back at you. And that lets you figure out what is happening in that sample, what all the molecules are.
He's creating a database to track honey and weed the fake stuff off the shelves. People have been sending samples from across Canada.
If we get a big enough database, we should be able to determine what the proportion is.
In the meantime, though, how can you tell if you're at the grocery store?
Look at how fast it's flowing. That's an indicator of the moisture content. In this case, what we see is this darker honey is flowing much, much faster than lighter honey.
The dark one has additives.
It moves very quickly.
It moves much, much faster.
But Arum's hope is if his machine gets enough buzz, you won't have to worry about fake honey at all. Anita Bathe, CBC News, Chilliwack.
Well, could cruise ships be making passengers sick? That's the argument from an environmental group behind research into air quality on the vessels. As our Renee Filipponi reports tonight, the industry is trying to scuttle those claims.
The study was conducted by a researcher at Johns Hopkins University and paid for by the environmental group Stand Earth. It looks at 4 ships run by Carnival Corporation, one which takes passengers from here in Vancouver to Los Angeles.
I'm on board the Emerald Princess.
A campaigner with the group, along with the researcher, booked themselves on the cruise trips. On board, they secretly conducted air quality tests during various times and at various places on the ships.
We found levels of particulate matter, ultrafine particulate matter in the back of the ship, behind the smokestacks while the ship was moving, that were comparable to some of the world's most polluted cities like Beijing and Santiago.
They say it can make health conditions like asthma for people on board worse. In a statement, Carnival Corporation disputed the claims, saying these so-called flyby tests are completely ridiculous, inaccurate, and in no way represent reality, and that we test the air quality of our ships and they meet or exceed every requirement. This UBC researcher questions some of the more drastic claims in the study, but says pollution from the shipping industry overall is a concern.
I think general supporting policies towards limiting some of this heavy fuel oil is really important, not just for air pollution, but also from a climate change perspective as well. Limiting some of this particulate matter pollution, I think is pretty important. But to be so alarmed just to cancel your cruise, I personally don't know if I would go that far.
Stand Earth is calling on travelers to stop taking cruises until they switch off marine fuel. The industry association points out that cruise ship traffic accounts for only 1% of vessel traffic worldwide, and that the industry has already committed billions of dollars to investing in LNG-fueled vessels. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, Vancouver.
Canada's ambassador to China is backtracking on controversial remarks he made yesterday. John McCallum waded into the political debate over Canada's detention of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, and now he's saying he misspoke. CBC's Katie Simpson has a look at his efforts to get back on side with the Prime Minister.
And as I said, I think Ms. Meng has quite a strong case.
Over 40 minutes on Tuesday, Canada's ambassador to China repeatedly advocated for Meng Wanzhou's release. Now he's trying to walk back those comments, saying it was all a mistake. In a statement, John McCallum wrote, "I regret that my comments with respect to the legal proceedings of Ms. Meng have created confusion. I misspoke. These comments do not accurately represent my position on this issue." McCallum's earlier comments to the media undermined the Prime Minister, who for weeks has said there will be no political interference in Meng's case. Still, Justin Trudeau is standing by his embattled ambassador.
Our focus is entirely on getting those Canadians home safe and making sure that all their rights are respected. And I don't see, and making a change would not help release those Canadians a day sooner.
Meng's arrest in December at the request of the U.S. has triggered a severe backlash from China. 2 Canadians have been detained and a 3rd ordered executed over drug charges. While the government tries to ease those tensions, calls are getting louder for Trudeau to replace McCallum.
But what I think might happen and should happen is that the government looks to its bullpen, it looks to the next ambassador, and that maybe there is an early transfer in either the late spring or the summer.
The political fallout so far is quite harsh, but this extradition expert says from a legal standpoint, it doesn't look like the U.S. case against Meng has been tainted.
I think it's simply, as I said at the beginning, a commonsensical view of the facts as we know them to date, and that it's a very weak extradition case, but of course that has to be tested in the court.
CBC's Katie Simpson with that report from Ottawa. A Canadian and former Abbotsford resident Robert Schellenberg is also caught up in the aftermath of Meng's arrest. A Chinese court recently increased his punishment in a drug smuggling case from prison time to the death penalty. This morning, Schellenberg's lawyer told CBC News an appeal will be launched this Sunday, just one day before time runs out to contest his death sentence. Sasha Petrusek has more from Beijing.
On a phone interview today with the CBC, his lawyer, Zhang Dongshou, says he's remained calm since receiving the verdict. He says Schellenberg met with Canadian consular officials 2 days ago. Now, Schellenberg was convicted after an unusually quick retrial last week, and he was sentenced much more severely than he was the first time around. That time it was 15 years in prison. Now it's a death sentence. Observers say the Chinese government is trying to make an example of Schellenberg. It's trying to pressure Canada into releasing Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive who was arrested in Vancouver, still being held there on an extradition request from Washington. Now, his lawyer says that we disagree with the verdict, of course. We don't believe there is enough evidence to justify the sentence, even if everything the prosecution presented were true. Now, this appeal could take many, many months, and if it is rejected, it still has to go to the top court here in China, here in Beijing, for its approval. This case is far from over. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Beijing.
19 years after she was murdered, 2 people accused of masterminding Jazzy Sidhu's murder, her mother and uncle, have been extradited to New Delhi from BC to stand trial. What a journalist who broke the original story thinks might happen next. Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's time for the political sniping to stop from all parties and reestablish trust in this institution, because right now it's in a real pit.
The NDP and Liberals trade barbs on the legislature's spending scandal, the Premier rejecting the opposition's call to work together to try to clean up the mess.
The extent of the honey fraud is just skyrocketing. It is getting out of control.
How a BC honey producer may hold the key to helping Canada fight back against honey fraud. He's created a database to track the fake stuff, and there's a lot of it out there.
And this is episode 2, trying to get them on a plane.
A Maple Ridge man and woman accused of masterminding the slaying of Jazzy Sidhu in India 19 years ago have been extradited from BC to go on trial for her murder. Punjab police say Jazzy's mother and uncle have landed in New Delhi. And for more on the story tonight, we're joined by former deputy editor of the Vancouver Sun and Province, Fabian Dawson. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You broke this original story. You've been following it for many, many years. What's your reaction, first of all, to the extradition?
The chapter in Canada is closed, and that brings some relief to me and to the people involved. But there's a whole new story developing now in India. With the extradition, they arrived there. I think they'll be arraigned in court in either today or tomorrow. And then that whole process begins in India.
And presumably that'll be a lengthy process. I understand that you're a little anxious about the proceedings?
I am, and I hope I'm wrong here, but there is some legal precedents, and there's some legal argument that because another of Jesse's uncles who has been who was charged and convicted, and the Supreme Court in India actually tossed out his case, giving him the benefit of the doubt that he wasn't involved with the crime. And those are the similar charges that both Jesse's mother and uncle currently face in India. So if the same trajectory, or the legal trajectory, is to follow, the chances are they could be acquitted, either in the lower courts or maybe ultimately in the Indian Supreme Court.
And just remind us, there have been convictions in connection with this case.
Yeah. At the end, currently, there are 3 in jail, a police inspector and 2 hired assassins, and they were directly involved with the crime. All the conspirators around the crime have not been convicted.
I just want to ask you finally, this has been described as an honor killing. Do you agree with that terminology?
Not at all. I wish somebody will come up with a better terminology, and some are trying, but this story has very little to do with honor. It's more to do with greed, very little to do with religion, more to do with convenience, and there was some indication during our research that there was other marriage plans that involve huge dowries that way, and cash transactions. So more to do with greed, less to do with tradition and religion.
Well, we will watch this upcoming trial with interest for certain over in India. We thank you, Fabian, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
At 18 minutes in front of 7 o'clock on this Thursday night, there's a look at downtown Vancouver this evening. A bit of a dreary day here on the South Coast, but have no fear, a sunny change around the corner. Amy Bell's back with the forecast next. Amy is back. We're kind of just stuck in that.
Yeah, it's kind of meh.
Boring, blah.
January.
Yeah, January.
What expect? But you know what? There's going to be a change soon.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Not tomorrow, but soon. We started off with the usual low cloud. We saw some drizzle, even had a few patchy showers here and there. We did see a few little breaks, sort of 8 o'clock-ish. We started to see things brightening up, and then again early into the afternoon, but we didn't really see any major clearing. And we did see that temperature. Oh, see, there's a little sunshine and blue sky. I wasn't lying. But we're not going to see too much of that again tomorrow. Still a chance of a few little breaks in the afternoon, but for the most part, another day of this very sort of stagnant air mass above us, and that means we just don't have those winds to generate any movement to push those clouds or that low-lying fog away. So that's why we're sort of stuck with this doldrum weather. But we will see a change. We'll get to that in a minute. For the next 24 hours, though, what we are going to see is we do still technically have a bit of a ridge of high pressure, so that's funneling all of the systems up and away from us. So seeing some precipitation in the form of showers down the north and central coast, even along Vancouver Island at times, and then seeing some light flurries for areas in the interior, the northern half of the province. For the most part, though, it's clouds. It's just a very calm pattern. What we will see over the next 24 hours to 48 hours, though, is those winds steadily starting to pick up a little bit, and we'll see some fog rolling in on Saturday, and then we'll start to see some widespread clearing Saturday night and into Sunday. But yes, as I mentioned, we've got showers, drizzle, I'll use that term lightly. Some flurries mixed with some sunny breaks in Whistler. You'll just be high enough above those clouds to see the sunshine, but staying pretty socked in the Fraser Valley. As I said, we'll see lots of precipitation for Prince Rupert. A few flurries, but much milder in Dease Lake. You'll be up to -2. Bit of a messy mix for Prince George area. You'll see some showers and some wet flurries, but just a few light flurries for Williams Lake. And for Cranbrook and Kelowna, you could see a few flurries, but then some sunnier breaks. And we're going to see things more widespread clearing and organized pattern as we head further into the weekend. So a couple more days of that dryish, grayish weather, meh, blah, however you want to describe it. But then look at Sunday and Monday. I know I said it earlier in the week, so I feel like nobody trusts me when I say it's going to be sunny, but it's really going to happen this time.
We trust you. We'll look forward to Sunday for sure.
It'll be nice.
Thanks, Amy.
You're welcome.
Well, political tension reaches new heights in Venezuela as its embattled president defies calls for his resignation. And now the U.S. is turning up the heat. More on that next. To breaking news now out of Ontario tonight. RCMP have raided 2 homes and arrested 2 people in Kingston as part of a national security investigation. And they say more arrests are possible. Few details are being revealed at this point, but CBC News has learned one of the people arrested was a minor. The investigation includes the Kingston Police, the FBI, and involved an RCMP surveillance plane that was seen circling the city in recent weeks. The CBC spoke to the owner of one of the homes involved. He says he had not been arrested and didn't know why the RCMP were at his house, but that officers had questioned his wife and children. RCMP are planning to hold a news conference tomorrow. Canada's threat level remains unchanged tonight. Well, one day after massive protests calling for his resignation, Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, is still in office, backed by senior military officials. And as the standoff continues, countries around the world, including Canada, are choosing sides. First, we turn to Paul Hunter, who takes us inside a country at odds with itself.
The remnants of yesterday's mega anti-government demonstrations in Caracas, burnt vehicles, shattered storefronts, and ever-lingering fury and frustration. The country is waking up sad today, said this man. Most Venezuelans say Maduro is illegitimate. Nicolas Maduro remains the president today, at least in his eyes. But for countless Venezuelans who deem his election last year rigged, who blame him for the country's extreme economic misery, the key moment in yesterday's protests when opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself acting president. Quickly recognized by Canada, the US, and others, but significantly not by Venezuela's powerful military. On Venezuelan TV today, multiple pledges of support for Maduro, said Defense Minister Pedrino Lopez. We are here to avoid confrontation. This as tensions with the US grow. Venezuela today closed all of its diplomatic offices in the US, and the White House has made clear today, labeling him profoundly corrupt, it wants Maduro gone. The question is how.
We have our eye very closely on Venezuela, very closely.
Donald Trump hasn't ruled out military action, but for now the focus is economic pressure, including diverting money for Venezuelan oil away from Maduro and into the hands of Guaido, if that's possible.
We think, consistent with our recognition of Juan Guaido as the constitutional interim president of Venezuela, that those revenues should go to the legitimate government.
Meanwhile, those protests yesterday underlined the real fear in Caracas tonight, that all of this may soon only get worse. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Efforts to end the longest government shutdown in U.S. history failed today. Bills from both the Republicans and the Democrats didn't get enough votes to pass the Senate. CBC's Ellen Morrow has the latest from Washington.
It's no surprise that both of the bills failed in the Senate today. The one put forward by the Republicans included funding for President Trump's border wall with Mexico. The one put forward by the Democrats did not. And the division over the border wall issue is the crux of this crisis, and any kind of compromise appears extremely far off. All the two sides can agree on is the ongoing shutdown is the other side's fault.
The bill that President Trump has put together can't pass the House and can't pass the Senate. So it has no chance of passing.
The Democratic leader's dead-end proposal that stands no chance of earning the president's signature.
So where do we go from here? Well, even though the votes failed, they do provide a potential starting point for further negotiations and could put pressure on more moderate lawmakers to come together and try to find some middle ground. But any middle ground that will please both Democrats and President Trump is extremely elusive. All the while, nearly 1 million Americans will not receive a second paycheck this week, forcing many of them to rely on food banks to make difficult choices about how to spend their savings as they wait for even the smallest sign of progress or compromise on Capitol Hill and in the White House. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
Mild here on the south coast, but the rest of Canada has been mired in a bit of a cold snap, wicked cold, especially when you factor in the wind chill. But what's the science behind that term? I'll tell you that next. Well, for many Canadians, a winter forecast isn't complete unless it includes a wind chill reading.
That's the feels like number. So feels like -25, for example, which expresses how exposed skin reacts to both temperature and wind. But critics, including some meteorologists, say it's inaccurate and unscientific.
And Cameron McIntosh has this report.
Spare a warm thought for Killeen Carr. Her first time on skates during her first Canadian winter.
How cold are you right now?
It's very cold.
Only 4 months here, she already has the weather down cold.
Do you know what the temperature is?
Yeah, -27.
Yeah, close, -26.
Oh, yeah.
Here at the Forks in Winnipeg, Environment Canada's weather station is reading a temperature right now of -26. Not uncommon for this time of year, but enough to warrant an extreme cold warning. However, it's another number that most people are focused on, -33. That's the wind chill, a measure many meteorologists just aren't comfortable with.
That's because it's not really a measure at all.
Wind chill is not actually measurable. Wind chill is derived from the temperature measurement and the wind measurement, so it's a made-up value.
It's an equation that factors wind speed and heat loss, estimating how much colder the wind makes skin feel, not when it will freeze. That should change, says meteorologist Scott Keeler.
I think actually using a time that it takes skin to freeze would make a lot more sense, and that way we wouldn't be conflating an actual measurement like air temperature.
So with respect to those Winnipeg poets, Bachman and Young, Portage in Maine has never actually hit 50 below, even if it can feel like it. But it's relatable, and that, says Environment Canada, is the point.
I think we should continue to do that and provide Canadians with a maybe imperfect, but a useful measure so that it allows them to make the right decision.
Take your toes. Back outside, Carr is more interested in the skating lesson than a science lesson. At some point, cold is just cold. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Bloody cold.
Very cold. Yeah.
So, yeah, a wind chill controversy, sort of.
Who knew?
Yeah.
I like it because it does make people understand that they need to keep their skin covered up and that maybe they need to put on that extra layer.
Exactly. So in Winnipeg, maybe they can Netflix and wind chill.
It's a whole new thing.
Hey, you can always find our news program online, cbc.ca/BC. Leanne's here at 11.